Good morning and welcome to this first formal meeting of the Corporate Parenting Panel. My name is Rachel Wilson and I am the Democratic Services Officer responsible for this panel. The audio-visual feed of this formal public meeting is being broadcast via the County Council's website. I would like to welcome the members of the press and public who are listening to this online. I would like to begin with a health and safety announcement. There is no fire drill planned this morning. In the event of the fire alarm sounding, we need to leave the council chamber through the rear doors and leave the building through the reception into the front car park. We then need to wait in the car park until further instructions. Can I remind everyone to ensure their mobiles, laptops and iPads are on silent. The first item on today's agenda is the election of chairman for this panel. May I please ask for nominations? Councillor Whittington.
Yes, thanks, Rachel. I would like to nominate Councillor Stephen Rowe for chairman. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any more nominations?
I'd like to second that proposal.
Thank you, Councillor Hates. If there's no more nominations, we've had Councillor Stephen Rowe proposed and seconded. Can we now vote on this, please? Thank you. Councillor Stephen Rowe is appointed as chairman for this panel for 2021-22. And over to you, Chairman, when you're ready.
Right, good morning. Good morning to the members, officers, press and public attending this corporate parenting panel. My name is Councillor Stephen Rowe and I'm pleased to be appointed as chairman for this panel. The second item on today's agenda is the election of vice chairman for this panel. May I please ask for nominations? I understand the previous vice chairman was Councillor Periton Williams, and is she joined us virtually or not?
I am indeed here, Chairman.
Hi there.
A voice from above.
Is this something that you wouldn't be against being put forward for again?
Yeah, that's absolutely fine.
Then I would like to propose Councillor Cleo Periton Williams to be vice chairman.
Thank you very much, Chairman.
Do I have a seconder, please? Councillor Whittington.
Yes, thanks, Mr. Chairman. I would like to second that nomination for vice chairman. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Do we have any other nominations? I'm assuming not. So if we now take the vote, please. All those in favour, please raise. Those against? Any abstentions? Thank you. Councillor Cleo Periton Williams is appointed as vice chairman for this panel for 2021-22. It says here, please take your seat. Stay where you are, Cleo.
Thank you.
Right, sorry. Before we move any further with the main business of this meeting, can I remind you that if you wish to ask a question during the course of the meeting, can you please raise your hand? Can I also remind members of the panel to switch on their microphones when invited to speak? Speak close to the microphone and switch their microphone off after they have made their contribution. Requests to speak will be collated by Yara. Please can you keep your questions and contributions succinct and concise. We will now move into the formal agenda. Apologies for absence. Rachel, do we have any apologies, please?
Thank you, Chairman. We have Apologies from Councillor Perrotton-Williams, but she is attending virtually as an observer. We also have apologies from Polly Coombs. We also have Councillor Mrs Killy, who is replacing the vacancy on the panel until further notice.
Welcome, Councillor Killy. Move on to item 4 then, declarations of members' interest. Members are reminded that they only need to declare any relevant interests which have not been declared on their declaration of pecuniary interest forms. Do any members wish to declare any interest? Councillor Whittington.
Yes, I mean, throughout the last corporate parenting panel, I declared an interest that my son, my adopted son, was in receipt of support from the Bernardo's Leaving Care Service. It's really just to say that he's now past the age, he got some great support from the Bernardo service. So it's not really a declaration, but it's just really to praise the Bernardo service for the help and support they gave him when he required it. And I will no longer have to make this declaration. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Whittington. Do any other members wish to make a declaration? So we move on to item 5, minutes of the meeting of the panel on the 11th of March 2021. This item is to confirm the minutes of our previous meeting held on the 11th of March 2021, pages 5 to 12 of the agenda pack, as a correct record. Can I ask for a proposer and a seconder, please? Councillor Higgs.
I'd like to propose.
Councillor Whittington, yes.
Thank you. I would like to second those. Thank you.
Thank you. We will now vote on the minutes. You're voting. Yes, you are voting on whether you agree that the minutes are a correct record. All those in favour, please raise your hand. Those against? And any abstentions? Thank you. Thank you. Those minutes are agreed as a correct and accurate record. Item 6, announcements by the Chairman, Executive Councillor and Lead Officers. At this point, I have nothing from Councillor Mrs Bradwell. Officers, I should say Janice.
No announcements, thank you, Chair.
Any, Andrew, any other officers? Nothing at this stage? Great, thank you very much. Right, this is a long agenda this morning with 4 additional presentations on reports. I would therefore like to ask officers to summarise the key points of their reports and what is required by the panel, and in regard to members of this panel to stress the importance of concise questions and contributions. Right, corporate parenting responsibilities, item 7. This item is a presentation which sets out the corporate parenting responsibilities of Lincolnshire County Council. The item will be presented by Janice Spencer, OBE, Assistant Director, Children's Safeguarding. We will take questions at the end of the presentation. Over to you, Janice. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Chiara, are you doing the... Thank you. Chiara's going to be my slideshow. Oh, is this on? Yeah. I think while we're just waiting, I'd probably just say I thought it would be helpful for new members of the corporate parenting panel, just to kind of have a little reminder of what the corporate parenting responsibilities are, and also for the members who've sat previously, a refresher. So moving on. So next slide, please. So just what is a corporate parent? So the Children and Social Work Act 2017 says that when a child or young person comes into the care of the local authority or is under 25 and was looked after by the local authority for at least 13 weeks after their 14th birthday, the authority becomes the corporate parent. So it's quite a technical, legal process that affords looked after or children in care status to children and young people. And there are 7 legal principles which serve to define the corporate parenting role. Next slide. Thank you, Kiara. So, as corporate parents, we must act in children and young people's best interests and promote their health and well-being. We must encourage expression of their views, wishes and feelings, and we must take into account their views, wishes and feelings. We must enable them to access and get best use of the services provided by the local authority and its partners, and we must promote high aspirations and the need to secure best outcomes. And we also must seek to ensure they are safe and have stability in their lives, relationships and educational work, and we must prepare them for adulthood and independent living. So moving on. So as corporate parents, it is every councillor's responsibility to make sure that the council is meeting the corporate parenting principles and to act towards children and young people and care leavers as a parent would for their own child. Lead members and those on corporate parenting panels and scrutiny committees will have particular responsibilities, but for all councillors, being a corporate parent means that when any service is being reviewed that could impact upon relevant children and young people, that they consider, would it be good enough for my child? And what can we do to put things right or make things better? So the council also has a duty to ensure, as far as reasonably possible, sufficient accommodation is available locally to meet the needs of children in care and care leavers. And I think as you become more familiar with some of the work in children's services, you'll hear a lot about our Children in Care Transformation Programme. I'm not going to talk about it today. There is a item on the next meeting's agenda which will talk you through that, but it's a really, really exciting and innovative time for us in Lincolnshire to ensure that we are creating placements close to home rather than at a distance. And councils should regularly review their position and report on how they intend to meet this sufficiency duty. And this is a valuable source of information for members in relation to the role as corporate parents. So, next slide. So safeguarding. So local authorities have a responsibility for safeguarding all children, but there are certain risks for children and young people in care and care leavers that corporate parents need to be aware of. And they are predominantly safeguarding for missing children. Children looked after and children in care are 3 times more likely to go missing than children not in care. We must have processes in place to report missing children. We must take action to find the child, and then we must follow up with them to establish the underlying reason for them going missing. And corporate parents should seek to monitor instances of children going missing and how regularly return interviews are taking place. And we must evaluate any emerging themes and provide wraparound support services for these particular vulnerable young children. And you will, over the course of time, get papers that will report on our progress in identifying the number of children that have gone missing. We have to interview with them within 72 hours, and it has to be done by a trusted adult and away from the home, because sadly, sometimes on occasion, and I have to say it's not a significant issue in Lincolnshire, but in the past, children have gone missing from homes, particularly residential homes, and they've been interviewed within the home and they've not been able to say the reasons why they've gone missing. So it's best practice to obviously interview the child in a neutral place. Again, children looked after or children in care are disproportionately likely to be at risk of child exploitation than those in the general population. And whilst the issues that led children and young people to enter care may increase vulnerability, the experience of care itself can also be a significant factor, especially when placements lack stability. And again, that's something that you will be monitoring in your role as elected members, and you will be scrutinising placement stability and the support services that we give to young people who are placed in the care of the local authority. And those at risk of child sexual exploitation need clear plans in place to protect them, and all social workers and partners should know how to spot the signs of risk and deal with them appropriately. And that's something that we work very hard to address in Lincolnshire. We've got very, very clear pathways for how we manage and respond to child sexual exploitation. And then just the last slide, Kiara. And this is really just a reminder of your key statutory duties. Local authorities have a duty to publish information about the services it offers to care leavers, which may assist them in preparing for adulthood and independent living. We must appoint a personal advisor for care leavers up until the age of 25, and Councillor Whittington clearly shared his experience for his son in that regard, which was very nice to hear. And that is regardless of whether the young person intends to pursue education or training, and the local authority has a duty to carry out an assessment of the young person's needs and to provide necessary advice and support. And although local authorities are required to offer advice and guidance to care leavers, the care leavers actually have the choice to accept this or not. I have to say, Bernardo's provide a very strong service to our care leavers, and very few of them decline that support. That concludes a brief presentation, a whistle-stop tour through what are your responsibilities as leave members. Hopefully today's panel will talk you through some of those challenges in the presentations and reports that you're going to hear today. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Sorry, do we have any questions? And
We've got Councillor Higgs.
Thank you, Chairman. Janice, I've got two quick questions for you. What time period constitutes a child going missing, and does it vary depending on the age of the child? Thank you.
Very good question, Councillor Hicks. Yes, it's very case specific. It depends on the vulnerability of the child. So every child who's at risk of going missing will have an individual safety plan. And in the safety plan, we will so some children, we will report them immediately. We know that they're missing. Some children have a tendency to be missing, but we know where they are, if that makes sense. So we kind of probably give them a little bit more time. We'll make efforts to go and recover them. So it is very child specific, very much around vulnerabilities and associated risk factors. Does that answer your question? Thank you.
do we have any other questions?
No more questions, Chairman.
Oh.
Got Councillor Keeley then, sorry.
Councillor Keeley, yes, thank you.
Can I just ask why 25 is, what is specific about the age of 25? Because I know it's young people, but I'd just like a bit more information on that.
Thank you, Councillor Kelly. It's about acknowledging that these children and young people actually, as they transition into adulthood, don't have the support services available to them that most families would. So, I can only talk from my own example. My daughter's 32 and she's still living with me at the moment, even though she's got her own home. She's just had a baby. So it is about acknowledging that. And it's quite good, I would suggest, and I'm sure Lisa and Andrew could talk you through this a lot more. They used to fall off a cliff at 18, but the legislation recognised that this was not good parenting, this was not right. And, brain development, I think, continues up until the age of 25 as well. So that's probably in a nutshell.
Thanks, Janice. I mean, partly the reason why I asked, I've got a daughter who's 24 and...
You were hoping you could lose her at 25. It doesn't work like that.
Thank you, Councillor Whittington.
Yes, I think that in her answer, I think that Jane's kind of explained it. It's the fact that children with their birth parents, when they get to 18, the parents don't suddenly say, "Oh, the adults, off you go into the big wide world." And I think it is, as Jane said, that it's the fact that in that transition between being children in care through that period of being young adults. It's to help them. I mean, even though our adopted son, we were still supporting him as parents, he did find the Bernardo service useful in terms of being able to open access and things like that. The sort of question I was going to really ask was, it's really just potentially more of an idea, because I know that in the last council, very early on, in the last council term, we had a members' development session around corporate parenting to try to emphasise to all the 70 members of the council that it's not just those children. It's not just those members who are on corporate parenting or on children's scrutiny. It's all members. And I know that looking at Andrew, because I know Andrew's the chair of the members' development group, and I'm also a member. I know we've got a meeting next week, so I was going to suggest, Andrew, that maybe we would like to consider that as one of the items that we hold a session for all members, just so that they're all aware of their responsibilities as corporate parents. Thank you. Thank
you. I just want to say to Councillor Perriton-Williams that although she's not here, she is here, and if she feels she wants to ask a question, please just let us know.
Thank you very much, Chairman.
Anything at this point?
No, I'm fine, thank you. I'd like to echo Mark's suggestion. That would be a fantastic thing, I think, again, just especially because there's some new members.
Okay, thank you. I've just got one comment to make. I'm fairly sure that councillors don't understand their role as corporate parents, and I just wanted to ask what we're going to do to sort of inform them. I remember during the last term quite a vigorous presentation by Andrew. They got some of the message over, absolutely. But just wondering if we've got anything planned in for this year yet.
We did have a workshop on Monday this week. That was for scrutiny, but I'm quite happy to work with Kiara and Rachel and set up another day, so officers can come and we can repeat what we did last year.
Yes, please. I think scrutiny will get the gist.
Yeah.
But I'm absolutely positive a lot of the new councillors that's not on won't, and I think it'll be useful. Yeah.
Yeah, we'll definitely do that. There you go, Andrew.
Right. Vigorous again. Right, thank you for the presentation, Janice. I propose we note the presentation. Can I ask that you raise your hand if you are in agreement? Thank you very much. Okay, so we move on to item 8, which I understand we're going to combine with item 10, Andrew. So away you go. Thank you.
Well, there you go. Sorry, I've never used the microphones in here before. Good morning, everybody. Yeah, I'm just here to do a brief presentation on the update and the final review of the Looked After Children and Care Leavers strategy. So the Looked After Children and Care Leavers strategy is a key document that guides the work and activity of everything we do for our children in care and our care leavers, and this has supported the development of the work since 2018, and 2021's come along very, very quickly, so this is due for a refresh. So I've written a report for the councillors that you've been able to see, and I've attached to it the current strategy that expires at the end of this year that we're in the process of now refreshing. I would want to welcome all members and officers around corporate parenting to be part of the development of the new strategy. And we're working on that through the Children's Transformation Programme, as Janice said. So attached is the report. There's an update of the strategy itself with a red, amber, green status alongside each of the activities that have been working on since 2018. And then the following, moving on from that, if Lisa has a brief presentation to do around the Looked After the Care Leavers annual report and our role as corporate parenting manager and service manager for the Leaving Care service. And as Janice alluded to in her previous presentation around the council's duty to ensure that every looked after child or care leaver has suitable accommodation, I've then got a brief piece to do on the housing options across Lincolnshire as well, just to bring members up to speed with how you as councillors have supported us as officers to provide suitable accommodation to young people. So if you wanted to move on to the presentation, Kiara, I'll let Lisa do her little bit, I'll do my bit, and then we'll take some questions if that's okay. Thank you. So that's just to introduce us as officers, and I'm the lead in services for Leaving Care 16 through to the age of 25, housing offers across Lincolnshire, and services to our unaccompanied asylum seekers, because any young person that presents as an unaccompanied asylum seeker under the age of 18 automatically comes into the care of the local authority, and by that very virtue they then become former unaccompanied asylum seekers and care leavers. Lisa?
Good morning, my name is Lisa Adams. I'm service manager working for Bernardo's, and we are in the lucky position of being commissioned to deliver the Leaving Care service on behalf of Lincolnshire County Council. I've been in post for about 3.5 years, and we have, I will go on to where the officers are, but we have 4 officers that are based across the county and also into Peterborough, but I'll explain that as we move on in the presentation. Okay, so we have a Leaving Care offer, a core offer that we offer to all of our young people. We work with young people, as we've talked about previously, who are basically 16 to 25 years old. we do what I would call a fuller service for the 18 to 21 year olds. We work alongside the children in care teams and the local authority FAST teams with our 16 to 18 year olds. And that's about trying to create a really good transition into our service. And I would say that we've had that contract in place since April last year, and we're certainly seeing the benefits of starting to pick up the young people earlier. We do joint supervisions on looking at the 16 to 18 year olds, so we're very, very clear what the issues are for that particular young person. We offer, like I said, a service then to 18 to 21, and then the 21 to 25 year old service, we would offer a full service for those who are in employment, attending college, university, on training courses, and then we offer a sort of an advice and guidance service to any other young people. What I would say about the age, though, is we've worked with a 28-year-old this year. We are not going to get us saying no. If it's a young person that we've known, if we feel that we can make a difference or help and assist, then we will do that. So although it is a cut-off at 25, we are more than happy to try and help if it's a Lincolnshire young person that we've worked with previously. We have some fairly specialist offers and posts within the service. We do some work, some employment and training officers who offer advice on courses, university access, apprenticeships. We also have a specialist housing officer who helps us with links into district councils, also for those young people placed out of area. And as I said, we've got offices based across the county, so one in Louth, one in Lincoln, one in Sleaford, and then a team who work in Peterborough. And why we've developed the Peterborough team is that we work with quite a large percentage of unaccompanied asylum seekers, and the housing contract for that particular group is in Peterborough, and we just felt that it was better to offer an office close to that particular cohort. Like I said, 95% of our care leavers are in suitable accommodation. And we do have a very robust service if somebody doesn't want to accept our service. But what I would say is that doesn't stop them coming back. If somebody's made a decision and said they don't actually want a service, they still get contacted every 12 months. We still encourage them to use the service if that's what they want. And the figure that we always talk about, it's something that you'll hear us talk about every time that we speak at corporate parenting, are the figures around education and employment, because it's something that we aim to work incredibly hard at, really. At the moment, we've got 54% of our 19 to 21 year olds who are in employment and training, but obviously that's a figure that we try and work on and improve daily, really. That figure isn't out of kilter with national figures, but it's something that, like I said, we recognise we need to try and push up, really. We also have an apprenticeship scheme where a number of young people, I think we've got 9 at the moment, are signed on as apprentices. They're actually employed by the council, but they then are apprentices in different sorts of organisations, really. We've had mechanics, those working in hospitality, somebody in a travel advice centre. So there's a range of different options that we offer there. And for those apprentices, we keep a very, very close eye on, so they tend to receive support weekly, really, from our specialist workers. We have just agreed with Health to appoint a dedicated mental health support worker. The role of that worker will be to do some individual work, but obviously it's only one worker across the county. We're looking more at that worker maybe doing some work with the teams, work looking at maybe those particularly high-risk young people, and helping us navigate our way through health, because it's an area that we see as a particular issue at the moment. So we really do feel that that's a good joint-funded post. We have an excellent supported lodgings offer, and what I would say to any of the councillors, if you are at all interested and you want to come and meet some of our providers, we can arrange that for you. It's a bit like a rent-a-room system where somebody is offering a room in their household, but it's so much more than that, really. So we have about 19 providers, again across county, who offer that service. We have some specialist workers who support them. And it's had some fabulous outcomes. Some young people who've been in incredibly expensive out-of-area placement have just really benefited from being in a home, really, I suppose is what I would say, and embraced that sort of family life. So we've got some excellent outcomes from that service. Andy has been able to work on with the district councils to more look at the offer that we have in relation to local connection. So our care leavers don't have to demonstrate a local connection to a district council. They are able to just show a local connection to, as a Lincolnshire young person. And also, like I said, we are looking at council tax relief as well for all care leavers. So if I could just have the next slide. So I'm just going to move on to Andy and let him talk about some of the housing provision that he is in with.
Thank you, Lisa. In my last presentation, I did a little piece about our housing offer, but I just wanted to draw your attention to two specific projects that we've got working in Lincolnshire County Council. It's our semi-independent living. There you'll see two houses, and that's our Lincolnshire's two semi-independent living options with Rowston Close in Gainsborough and Denton Avenue in Grantham. Next slide, please, Ciara. These two projects were set up over the last 3 or 4 years, and we slowly developed those. These are old firehouses that the council gave to children's services, and we developed them into homes that are not regulated by Ofsted because they're designed as semi-independent living for children between the ages of 16 and 18. But just to assure of members that all of the services delivered to the same high standards and are Reg 44 reviewed, and I'm sure you'll find out more about Regulation 44 reviews, that we have an independent officer come to our children's homes, meet the children, the assistant manager, myself, the young people, and ensure that those homes are safe, suitable, high standard with excellent support. And both those homes are staffed 24/7 with staff sleeping in at night, and the young people all have personal development plans wrapped around them. I won't go through all the points on the slide, but what I wanted to show is that Lincolnshire County Council really does support its looked after children or children in care and care leavers really well, and these are the kind of offers that officers and members have worked really hard together to secure and ensure that we have them available to our children and young people. And again, rather like supported lodgings, if you ever wanted to come and see, we call them the firehouses affectionately because they used to be for fire staff, but they've now been taken over by children's services, and we've got young people living there with staff 24/7. And that fits really nicely with our, if the next slide please, Ciara, it works really nicely with our Nest offer that comes through with NACRO, which is NACRO Education Support and Transition Service, and that is the service I brought to your attention last time with the map, which is on the next slide, Ciara, that shows where all of the services are, where all of those bedrooms are available, and how the semi-independent living model fits with our Nest offer that works with supported lodgings and integrates into leaving care. So that's a little whistle-stop tour of what Lisa and I deliver and what the strategy for our children in care and care leavers was and how it will develop. And that just gives you a flavour of the people who are kind of the key officers around the offer for young people from the ages of 16 to 25. And I know that Sarah Kasky-Hefferman, who's the operations manager for NACRO, couldn't be here, but Kerry Mitchell, the assistant director of Bernardo's, I believe is online. So we're available if members have got any questions. Thank you.
Okay, do you have...
Councillor Whittington.
Yes, thank you, Andrew and Lisa, for that presentation. Regarding the semi-independent living arrangements, the Denton Avenue site in Grantham is in my area. It's in the division represented, and I did go and visit there. I think just after it opened several years ago, and I certainly know when I'm sort of picking up is doing fantastic. And that was the first one. Then Gainsborough came along subsequently. I understand at the time they were designed sort of as pilots. Are there any more plans to do any more of this type across the rest of the county? Because certainly the feedback I'm receiving is that they're really effective. Thank you.
Thank you. In regards to semi-independent, no, we don't have any aspirations to create more semi-independent living options. As Janice alluded to in a presentation, there is a transformation project around children's residential, which is our regulated option. But I don't think, looking at the figures and statistics as well about the number of looked after children and children in care leavers that we have that are in suitable accommodation, there's necessarily the need for much more. Now, what I wouldn't want to do is flood the market with too many beds and not have, you know, and then have something that's just not good value for money for the children or the community. But we do keep an eye on it all the time. And at the moment, those beds, we do have some vacancies. So there is capacity within the system. And I'm working this afternoon with one of my colleagues to look at young people to come back in from out of county. So there isn't any at the moment because we don't quite see the need right now.
Do we have anybody else?
Councillor Matthews.
Thank you very much, Chair. Do we have any Lincolnshire children in care who are out with our system but sitting inside other systems like Twainton Hall is a sort of a large residential care facility, and I've got a very large residential care facility in Alford. What I'm asking is the presentation you're making is very good, but is it the totality? Are there people out with the system that should be within our system, if that makes sense? I know, silly question.
No. What we do have is what we call children that are placed in out of county provision, and even though we class it as out of county, that's because it's not within our local provision, but it might actually still be in Lincolnshire. So yes, we will have, certainly children with disabilities will possibly be attending Taunton as young adults. We certainly have some young people that we have placed in specialist provision in other areas of the country. But I have to say we take a very great pride in keeping our children close. And, you know, that is work that we are continuing to drive forward. As Andy just mentioned, we are looking at the residential estate, as I mentioned earlier about the Children in Care Transformation Programme. We are looking to expand our residential provision because what we are seeing is an increase in young people, particularly younger children, requiring that specialist provision. So to answer your question, yes, we do have some young people that are placed in external provision, but they're not a great number.
I was on the transition working group last year, and I just wonder if that's working, because that seemed to be an interesting issue when children got to 16, 17, 18, and parents were almost making a decision that, not parents, but foster parents, adopting couples, we want them to stay with us, which was inappropriate, and we don't want them to go there, or we want them to go there and we don't want them to stay with us. And I just wondered if that's a pinch point for you.
Transitions is always a tricky area. I'd like to say that we have worked really hard with our colleagues in adult services, and actually the process and the pathway now is much smoother and much clearer. One of the challenges we did have was around when we identified young people needing to transition, and it is that, you know, you'll hear a lot talking about transition into adulthood. If you're a young person with complex needs, you have kind of a parental perspective of what a transition into adulthood looks like, and it's a complicated area, but our children with disability team is very, very experienced. We've got really good, strong relationships, and I'd like to think, I'm just in the top of my head, I've got 3 children that we are transitioning, and the pathways are working really well. There will always be one though that we will find and struggle. Thank you.
Cara, do we have anybody else?
No more questions.
Cleo, do you have a question to ask before I ask mine, please?
No, I'm fine. Thank you, Chairman.
Okay, thank you. A question for Andy and Lisa, really. Do you get any notification from the agencies that we work with about possible apprenticeships? I'm aware that the new highways contract that came in last year, there's a commitment in there for them to take on apprenticeships. I'm also aware of our own private company, the transport company, will be looking for 2 apprenticeships. And I'm just wondering what sort of notice you get, if any.
Interestingly, I had an email only from Heather the other day linking me in via the Chief Executive, actually, that some providers that are working with our transport services are looking at apprenticeships, and the link was made directly back to myself to look specifically for care leavers that might be interested in an apprenticeship in that area. It is something we need to grow and improve, and I think it's what we're referring back to earlier about the Members Development Day. If we can really work on that and spread the word about apprenticeships and our looked after children, our role for finding support and additionality for our care leavers, that will only get better. So we're working on it, but yes, it is improving. I am now being approached rather than having to approach people about apprenticeships, and I know Lisa will probably give a little bit more of that if you've got anything.
Some of the issue with apprenticeships is about the standard and educational qualification you have to be able to do an apprenticeship. So it's quite a high benchmark to be able to actually qualify to do that. And some of our young people haven't reached that benchmark. But what I would say, I can just give you some example of maybe how we're trying to forge some links, which I think is we've just done a mentoring programme with Serco. So it's had some great results where, because Serco is a partner with the County Council, they were really interested in being able to provide some mentoring for some of our young people to maybe help them look at maybe accessing apprenticeships, think about what courses they need, think about job interviews, think about preparing for work. We've run two separate cohorts through that, and that seems to be working incredibly well, really. So again, it's about how our service is reaching out to independent providers to try and offer something additional for our care leavers.
Thank you. My main concern was that the information was coming to you to give you the opportunity. It came from a highways meeting I sat on the other day, where I was made aware of an apprenticeship possibility, but there was no natural course that my expectation was that Andrew would have heard. So that's where that came from. It wasn't meant as a criticism that you weren't asking, just I felt that you should be told. So thank you both. Right, so I've lost it. I move that I move that we receive the report and comments from the discussions on both the combined reports, and that the presentations are noted. Can I ask you to raise your hands if you're in agreement? Yeah, thank you very much. So we now go back to item 9, Children in Care Performance Measures, Q4 2020-21, January to March 2021. This item is on page 79 to 102 of the agenda pack and provides key performance information for Q4 2020-21. Relevant to the work of this panel, the report will be presented by Janice Spencer. We will take questions at the end of the report. Thank you, Janice.
Thank you, Chair. As the Chair's just said, this is the Q4 report and January to March 2021. We've reported on 16 measures, and I will talk through the 7 that are outside the target as the exceptions. I think what we're seeing here is actually the impact of the pandemic on some of our achievements. So the first one is the fostering and adoption of children in care aged 10 to 16, and this is a measure where children have been in care for 2.5 years and have been in the same placement for 2 years. What we have seen over the last 12 months is we've had carers shielding, so our access to foster carers has been reduced. We have seen a number of younger children, as I talked about earlier, requiring residential provision, and they've had to be moved into provision outside of the county. And we've seen a number of teenagers whose family placements have broken down and they've come into care as what we call late entrants. So it's, and they've moved a couple of times until we've found the right provision for them. So it's a combination of all of that. What I would say is, although 78.9 is below our target, it's still a very respected number of children and young people that are living in a family arrangement in foster or adoption. It's above our stat neighbours. And the stability of placements of children in care, and this is a measure that monitors the number of times children actually move placement. So it's three moves within a 12-month rolling programme. So again, this has been above our target, but again below national average and stat neighbours. And it's a combination of all those things I've just talked about. It's the challenges that we have of managing some of these young people's behaviours. While it is higher than it's expected, what I have asked performance to do is just kind of get a little bit more detail for me, because what I do know is that the government actually count placement moves. So if you move with say you move house as a foster carer and you take your foster child with you, the government will count that as a placement move, which just seems a bit perverse, really. So I've just asked them to test that out, just to see if there are some children in there that, while we have to report to the government on, actually they haven't really had a placement move, they're actually still with their carers. Then the percentage of children in care with an up-to-date health check, whilst again this is below the target that we want, it is still quite good, considering that we have been through a pandemic. What we are seeing is, as I've just described, we've seen a number of what we call late entrants into care, so that's older young people who actually, what we would class as phase competent, and they can make decisions about whether they do want a health assessment or they don't want a health assessment. What I would say is the children's nurses are excellent and work really closely with these young people. And whilst they might not have a formal health assessment, they will have an informal health conversation and they will be signposted. We have seen a decrease in our initial health assessments being completed as well, which is very, very sad actually, because we had a nurse-led pilot, which was really, really successful. And then sadly, the Public Health England decided that that could no longer be the case, and we've had to go back to the GPs. Now, obviously, there's a shortage of GPs, as you all know. It's been very difficult to get an appointment with a GP, certainly one where you could go and have an assessment. But just to reassure you that whilst that is lower than we would want, that we are constantly working with our health colleagues and they are exploring how they might be able to re-establish the nurse-led model, which I have to say I would prefer. The percentage of children in care with an up-to-date dental check, as you can see, is very low. It's, and again, that was about, dentists were closed. They were absolutely closed. What I would say is over the last few months, the government have made children looked after or children in care an absolute priority. So we have been in communication with all our foster carers, all our adopted carers, all our residential staff, and we are working to get our young people seen by a dentist. So I'm hoping when I report next quarter, we'll see an improvement in those figures. And the percentage of children in care with up-to-date routine immunisations, again, affected. These are predominantly the ones that we give to children in school, and they're boosters. So again, lots of children haven't been in school, but the nurses are very live to this. They have got a programme in place, which has become more complicated because the boys are now going to be offered HPV, so they've got additional burdens in order of the catch-up, but they're very confident that they can do this. They are prioritising as well, so our under fives will be prioritised for their immunisations and vaccinations. So again, hopefully next quarter we'll see an improvement there. Care leavers in education, employment or training, I think, Lisa's here if you wanted to ask anything specific. But Bernardo's are very live. They know every young person that they work with. They know what their status is with regards to their education, employment and training. And as we've discussed as well, we've created 2 additional posts that will be focusing specifically on education, employment and training for care leavers. So that's for a 12-month period, and that's absolutely in recognition of the impact and the effect of the pandemic on this particular vulnerable cohort. And then I'm pleased to end on a bit of a high with our children in care living within a family environment. As you can see, that's up at 77.8, which is on target, well, above target. And again, that's really a really pleasing statistic. So, any questions?
Okay, Chiara, do we have any questions, please?
Thank you. We have Councillor Higgs, then Councillor Matthews.
Thank you, Chairman. Janice, you've mentioned dentists, but to my experience, trying to see a doctor is even harder than trying to see a dentist. So have you got any information about access to doctors for the children? Thank you.
The up-to-date health checks, those are the ones where the children will have been seen by a doctor for their initial health assessment and then followed up by a nurse. We haven't had any, I haven't been cited on any challenges that we've had around getting treatment for our young people when they've needed it. If they've needed to go into hospital, they've gone into a hospital. If they've needed to be seen by the GP, they have been seen by the GP. That might be a virtual consult by telephone, but unless Deborah can tell me differently, I've not been made aware that we've had any challenges at all around getting our young people seen when they've needed to be seen by a doctor. And we've got some very vulnerable young people, as you can imagine, some of those children with very complex disabilities. So I hope that answers your question.
Thank you. Just a quick comment. I actually had to cancel a dental appointment to be here today, and I found it harder to get dental appointments than doctors. Councillor Matthews.
Thank you, Janice. My question about fostering adoption for children in care aged 10 to 16 years old, which you've said that you're disappointed that you've not been able to meet that target. It's a more generic question than this, but so that would be our ideal, that children will be adopted. Do they actually want to be adopted? Are there some instances of young people and young adults who actually don't see that as an ideal model? And because it seems to me that we're almost imposing a traditional expectation. When I grew up, you have a mum and a dad and you live in a house and everything's all right. But I sense that younger people, including my own sons and daughters, are living their lives in different ways. The traditional family model is historic. And I just wonder if this, I mean, it's a good outcome, I think, but I just wonder if this measure allows us some wiggle room, or they should allow us some wiggle room, say actually they don't want to do it. Just to like your comment on that.
You're absolutely right, and there would be no point at all actually enforcing an adoption arrangement on a child that didn't want it. And I think we're quite sophisticated in Lincolnshire. We understand which children need to be adopted and which children don't. We've got very clear twin tracking processes in place so that we are monitoring those young people. You're absolutely right, and our adoption arrangements very diverse now. We have same-sex couples, we have single families, so we kind of match and meet needs. But no, we would never ever, especially an older child, because they would just disrupt it, and that would just be heartbreaking and painful. But we would want everybody to live in a family environment if it was possible and right for them.
I absolutely agree with you. It's about placing a measure on something that's almost inappropriate.
Cara, do we have any other? Good.
We have Councillor Whittington.
Thanks, Janice, for the report. And I know that it's exceptional at times, because normally when these performer stats come to us, there's loads of greens there and there's reds now. And I think we can all appreciate it's the difficulties of the last sort of 18 months. But in terms of those, and just sort of one general question, then one specific. Given the fact that obviously there's been a lot of disruption over the last sort of 18 months, and there's been some slippage on some of these, quite understandable slippage on some of these targets, how long do the team think it'd be before it's sort of almost back to normal? You know what I mean? Because you know, obviously with stats, you kind of look to see trends, and of course all the trends have been disrupted now by COVID. So the first is sort of a general question around that. Second is a bit more specific around foster parents, because I know you sort of mentioned it before, and also at children's scrutiny, that obviously it's been quite a challenging period for our foster carers, because I think it's been mentioned before that they tend to be at the higher end of the age cohort themselves. So potentially a lot of them have had probably more specific sort of isolation sort of protocols that they've had to follow. But I was just wondering, obviously aware that from time to time we see the county council going out advertising, looking for fostering and adoptive parents. Again, just any indication that that our current foster parents are sort of gradually coming out of COVID and willing to sort of take on more children in care? And secondly, around that, if we are identifying that there is a gap there, what can we do to sort of try and bridge that? And because obviously you can only place children with foster parents if the places are there. And again, I'm just wondering if that's something that the members could sort of do, perhaps liaise with their district councils or whatever. Just trying to find ways to get the message out there. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Whittington. I'll take your first question first. The trajectory to recovery, I think, at this point is really difficult to predict. I really wouldn't like to say 12 to 18 months. You know, it's kind of like there's a lot that's emerging that we've kind of still having to take into consideration and factor into our plans. But I just would want you to be reassured that we are very live to that. We do meet very regularly. You know, we meet monthly to look at all of our performance and to see where we are kind of picking up or not, and what do we need to do to recover. So I couldn't, hand on heart, say to you in 18 months it'll all be over, because I don't know, in September we might be having another lockdown from, you know, what's being said in the media at the moment. So, but I would want to reassure you that we are absolutely monitoring this, and we are absolutely looking at where we need to put our resources and where they're best deployed. With regards to foster carers, I don't know whether Deborah might want to chip in as well. We are seeing them coming out of COVID, although not quite as many as we would want to, for, again, a whole host of personal reasons. We are currently, as we've talked earlier, and this is something you'll hear a lot about, is the transformation programme. We have got a work stream that's called Rethink Fostering, and it's absolutely doing those things that you've just described. It's looking at how do we make ourselves the most attractive fostering agency in the marketplace, because if you Google fostering in Lincolnshire, what you'll get is we'll be probably 5th or 6th on the list, because all of the independent fostering agencies that sit in this county will have paid to kind of be at the top. So we are developing our support to carers so that we hold their hands from their initial contact and we walk them through the process. So we are, you know, as I say, rethinking how we might do that differently and better. And our caring to learn is something that our carers, or foster carers, have really found beneficial, and we're looking to expand that across the whole of the fostering network. Deborah, I don't know if there's anything you might want to add.
Can you hear me? Yeah, that's fine. Hi, good morning. I think Janice has eloquently kind of put that together in terms of where the situation is with regards to fostering, recruitment and retention. What I would say is that the foster families have been absolutely fantastic through the last 18 months and have faced more challenges than perhaps some of us have in terms of having houses full of children and such like. What I would say is that we have a strong sense of loyalty from foster carers who want to care for Lincolnshire children and keep them within the heart of the community. Our best efforts day in, day out are about retaining foster carers, appreciating and valuing them, and also looking to enhance our stock, if you like, of local families that can home our Lincolnshire children in care. We have foster carers from a diverse range of backgrounds. Some are towards the older demographic, if you like, but they are in for the long haul. And I've personally had the privilege of meeting some of the carers through the pandemic. We use them to help with our recruitment. We use Caring to Learn champions to support our recruitment activity. But I would just echo a word of caution that the marketplace, if you like, for fostering is very, very competitive. So we have a dedicated marketing approach. We have a large presence in terms of the digital market and kind of endeavour to embrace people. We have had a spike in interest during the from March 2020 to where we are now. And I think that is probably because of people's reflections around life and contemplation about what they can offer and put back into society. And we are hoping that going forward, much of that interest actually converts into people wanting to register to become foster carers. So overall, it's been a difficult and challenging time, but credit where credit's due to the foster carers of Lincolnshire and the members of staff that support them.
Thank you. Do we have any other questions?
Yes, we've got a question from Councillor Keeley.
Thank you. Can you just clarify, because this is, I'm quite concerned about the foster care market being a competitive market. To what extent, how can you work through the needs of the child who, what place do they, if I was a young person and I needed foster care, how do you have a pathway to suit their needs if it's such a competitive market? It seems a bit of a jungle out there, really.
It is. Unfortunately, it certainly is a competitive market in foster care, and it's even more competitive in residential provision. So I won't get started on that one. But what I would say to you is, as Deborah's articulated, obviously we have got a stock of foster carers. We support them, and as Deborah said, they're very proud to work for us in Lincolnshire. And what we are doing is kind of trying to grow the number of foster carers that provide foster provision for us in Lincolnshire. What I would say, as difficult and as challenging it is for me, morally and ethically, to have to place with an independent fostering agency, if I would not have a child languishing in care, if they could meet those needs of that child. So we do have children that are placed in what we call external fostering provision. So that is the independent sector. It's very costly. It doesn't deliver anything other than what we can, other than that we probably didn't have the resource available at that time. So it is really complicated. There is a care review going on at the moment that's absolutely looking at some of those challenges that the market has created, because it does, there are some local authorities that are not in the privileged position that we're in. One not so far from us, where 50% of their children are placed in external provision at an astronomical cost. So yeah, you're absolutely right. There's great challenges there, but we are very fortunate that we do have our large stock. While we talk about wanting to increase the stock, that's right and proper, because we want our Lincolnshire children with Lincolnshire carers. But if we had to place a child in an independent provision, we would, if that was right for that child.
Sorry, can I just ask a follow-up, a supplementary question? So, presumably, once the child has been placed, how frequently are they asked to use how well they have settled down? I mean, does the same criteria apply to, your provision and these independent providers?
Absolutely, yes. So even though they're classed as independent, that's because they're private companies, so that's why we class them as independent. But they are governed by the same regulations as we are, absolutely. They have to go through the same processes that we do. And it doesn't matter where we have a child placed, we continue to visit that child in accordance with the statutory regulations that are imposed upon us, and in some cases more frequently if needed. So no, there would be no child that we would just place somewhere else and not monitor their arrangements. And I would say as well, as difficult as it is, if children are settled, then we wouldn't seek to move them either, just for a financial reason. We would continue to support that provision.
Councillor Whittington, please.
Yes, thanks, Mr. Chairman. I think actually the point I was going to raise is, you may just have answered that, Janice, because as soon as I think it was just when Deborah was talking about independent, I probably have the same alarm bells ringing as Councillor Kelly had. So my question really was going to be around the sort of the regulation of the independent providers, but I think you probably covered that in your previous answer, because obviously, we are subject to Ofsted, and we got outstanding Ofsted rating was kind of and you just, you're a bit nervous about sort of independent providers who may not necessarily have the same sort of rigor of regulation. Do they have Ofsted inspections as well? But but I think it's been mainly answered. Thanks, Mr. Chairman.
Just to pick up on the Ofsted inspections, yes, they are. They're all subject to whether the residential provision or fostering agencies or even adoption agencies, although I have to say the adoption agencies are not necessarily independent. They're more voluntary organisations. Yes, and we would not place a child in a provision that requires improvement. We would only ever place with good or outstanding.
Okay, Cleo, if you're still with us, have you any questions?
I am still with you. No, I'm fine. Thank you very much.
Okay. So, a couple of questions from myself. First off, we have our targets and we have our results. One assumes that if one drops below a target, we're immediately onto it. What tends to concern me a lot is you do something very well and you're running above the target and it starts to drop but doesn't hit below target. Do we have a cut in there where we start to look at something that's dropping before it actually goes below the target?
Yes, we do, Councillor Rowe. We constantly monitor our performance. There's some performance we monitor daily, some performance we monitor weekly, some performance we monitor monthly. And you're quite right, is if we start to see a dip, obviously we need to understand what that dip's about and what do we need to do to try and recover that. So I think the example we've just discussed, the foster carers, you know, it's below our target, but it's higher than the other targets that are set nationally. So we are focusing very much on improving that one.
Okay, thank you. Probably the wrong place at the minute, but the other thing I was interested in was the marketing side. I have a history in marketing, and I would very much like at some stage to look at that, but then it struck me that the other councillors might like a chance of that, so I'll bring it up at the work programme later. Yeah. Right, thank you. So the panel is invited to consider and comment on the performance information contained in the appendices of this report and recommend any actions or changes to the Executive Council for Children's Services, Community Safety and Procurement. I propose that the panel receives and has reviewed the report and is satisfied with the performance information for Q4. Can I ask you to raise your hands if you're in agreement, please? Thank you very much. So we now move on to item 11, Legal Services Lincolnshire End of Year Report, April 2020 to March 2021. This report on pages 117 to 138 of the agenda pack provides the panel with background information on legal services and presentations will be provided. This item will be presented by Jodie Ogden and Sarah Cragg, lawyers from Lincolnshire Legal Services, and again we'll take questions at the end. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. So we've heard a lot already this morning with regards to corporate parenting, how that fits in with children's services from Janice's perspective, from housing, from Bernardo's, and this is really just an overview to the members with regards to how legal services fit into that, because it can be quite a complicated area. So just to introduce you, if I could have the next slide please, Chiara, thank you. My name is Jodie Ogden, I'm one of the senior lawyers within the team, and with me today is Sarah Cragg, also fellow senior lawyer. So to give an overview of our team within legal services, our acting principal lawyer is Nicola Corby, who I understand has been a member of this panel before to deliver this report. And we're also quite a large team of 7 other lawyers, 11 legal officers and 2 trainee solicitors at the moment, again in an attempt to grow our own in such a specialist and niche area of law. In accordance with the report that has already been made available to you today, you will have seen that there has been an increase in care proceedings and our involvement with children in Lincolnshire. And in light of that, we do also externalise around 30 cases with an external private firm of solicitors to ensure that children's services and the county have the advice available to them as and when they need it, because ultimately we are an extension to the safeguarding of children in Lincolnshire. And that's extremely important, and that's the reason why we can't scrimp and scrape with the lawyers that are needed when the casework still keeps coming in, and absolutely the children are our paramount concern. So, as I've set out, legal services offer the additional layer of safeguarding support and advice relating to children across the county. Therefore, if any of the social work teams across all of the 8 districts feel that their concerns for the children cannot be managed within Team Around the Child or Child in Need or even child protection measures, they can seek their management approval to obtain legal advice, and it's at that point that they would then come to us. All of the children known to legal are allocated a designated lawyer and legal officer, and in addition to that, every working day we have a duty lawyer on call and a duty legal officer for any of those emergent situations that may arise. So I'll pass over to Sarah to explain what it is we do.
Thank you very much, Jodie. So just a quick whistle-stop tour in terms of the sort of work that the childcare team in legal services are responsible for. The first port of call, and where most legal involvement starts, is what we call LPMs, which is short for legal planning meetings, as set out on the slide. This is when social work teams come to the legal team to get legal advice about whether or not the local authority meets the relevant tests to mean that legal steps need to start being taken to safeguard children. Jodie's already mentioned that we run a duty scheme, and it's the duty lawyer of the day that gets the joy of holding the legal planning meetings that day. And after the legal planning meetings take place, that's when it is allocated to a specific lawyer and legal officer. The next stage in the process is often what we call the pre-proceedings process. There's some further information about this at pages 135 and 137 of the legal report, which you've already been provided with. In essence, this process involves the legal team holding a meeting with the parents and the social work team, and also parents' legal representatives, to discuss the local authority's concerns, what's happened to mean that matters have had to be escalated, and to try and set out a plan of what can be done to avoid anything getting any worse, and the need for the matter to be taken to court. This process is really important because it, can often result in families making the necessary changes required to reduce concerns, and therefore mean that legal involvement can come to an end. But it is also important because in the event that changes aren't made, and we do need to take the matter further, it allows evidence to be gathered. And the data has shown that if we go through pre-proceedings before court proceedings, it reduces the length of the court proceedings and also the cost to the local authority, which is obviously really important. There has been an increased focus on the pre-proceedings process recently from the president of the Family Division, who's stressed that this process needs to be really robust. Fortunately, in Lincolnshire, we had already implemented, and we're already doing a lot of the recommendations that have been made by the President of the Family Division. There's 2 in particular processes that we've developed in Lincolnshire, which help mean that our pre-proceedings are particularly robust. The first of those is a pre-birth protocol, which means that now babies will come to legal from as early as 14 weeks, which can make sure that there's plenty of time before a baby arrives for any assessments to take place, any support to be put in place, so that everybody knows where they are when the babies do come along. Secondly, we've also developed an initiative that we call PSMIP, which stands for Parental Substance Misuse Intervention Programme, which is a multi-agency pre-proceedings process which is designed to help families where substance misuse in particular is the main issue that the local authority is concerned about. And the intention of that process is to get all of the agencies together, including housing, substance misuse services, and trying to put in intensive support to avoid the matter needing to go to court proceedings, which, if we could have the next slide, please, Jodie's now going to talk to you about.
So, however much we would love pre-proceedings to divert all matters away from the court arena, unfortunately, we don't always have that joy, and there are children at that stage that we feel cannot be managed without the assistance of the judiciary. So, as set out within pages 119, I believe, within the report, we do set out the difference between an application for a care order or an application for a supervision order. And they are the two public law orders that we have the permission to apply to the court for to ensure the safety of the children across Lincolnshire. So in the event that a child or children come into the legal department and they are at risk of significant harm, we may be jumping over the pre-proceedings section that Sarah's just alluded to, or we may be working within pre-proceedings and then have everything front-loaded to then present matters to the court. And as it sets out, if we were to have an interim care order throughout the proceedings, whilst assessments are ongoing, whilst further work is undertaking, that child is then a child in care. We have parental responsibility for that child as a local authority, and we need to ensure that the care plan for that child is scrutinised and approved by not only ourselves as the local authority, but also by the court, and also the children have a children's guardian appointed to them who are independent and also have their say in terms of the best placement for the child, the best level of contact the child should have with parents, etc. So all of that is then under the umbrella of the court, has that high level of scrutiny, and it is absolutely essential that throughout that process we then work towards the court timescales. We are ensuring that any placement of that child is in the best interest of the child and meets their need. And as it's been raised at today's meeting already, if there are any themes, if there is a need for review, that is all done within that court process. The court is informed and has that overall oversight of steps for the children in care. If, however, a child is presented to the court and it can be managed without the need for the local authority to have parental responsibility, we do have that additional resource of seeking an interim supervision order or a supervision order, and that ultimately imposes the local authority a duty to assist and befriend and support that child. So it is a lesser level of involvement for the child or the children, but it is still a statutory duty of the local authority, and that is also something that, again, you will see in the report is utilised by Lincolnshire and across the county. So in terms of the proceedings, once they're issued, legal services will then represent the local authority at hearings, as again this year has shown all of us sat in this room and remotely that things have changed a lot over the last 16-17 months. So an in-person hearing now is very rare. We've been very used to Skype for business hearings, telephone hearings. Now it's moved to the cloud video platform regime, but thankfully that is all working extremely well to allow effective hearings to continue for the benefit of the children, to ensure that we can have as swift a decision for the children as possible if the matters are presented to the court. So in addition to that, I've also set out on the slide here that we have the twin tracking process that Janice has also alluded to during today's meeting. And that's the permanence planning, because we need to be looking at all options for the children. It may be, as set out in the report over this last year, there has been 72% of children who have been made subject to care orders following hearings and following court proceedings. However, some may require that the child is placed for adoption. So the additional scrutiny that legal services offer in that regard is an independent lawyer will look at the case completely objectively. They will look at the bundle, they will look at the assessments that have been completed. They will ensure that all options for this child have been considered before the very robust plan of adoption is presented to the court, because of course that is the last resort for a child, and we do have a duty to place the child with a family member if at all possible and if safe to do so. So that additional sort of rigorous implementation from legal services with the independent objective view presenting the advice to the agency decision maker at the time really assists in the care planning and moving things forward for the child or children. In addition to what's set out on the slide there, there are other factors that legal services assist in, whether that's an application to discharge a care order if the child has been made subject to a care order concluding proceedings, and throughout the review process it deems that that is a far too onerous order for the child and the child doesn't need that statutory duty implemented onto the child, then we are often instructed to make applications to discharge that care order so that the child can then continue with their childhood without that statutory implementation. That doesn't, however, take away their looked after status by way of leaving care services, because they may have reached that period that has been set out already in today's meeting with regards to being in care and the services that are available for children leaving care. So there are a wide number of areas that legal services assist with, and that isn't the end of it. So I'll just pass over to Sarah for the next slide in terms of how we then go about our day-to-day work.
Thanks, JD. So the most important and the thing job and the thing that keeps a lot of lawyers busy is scrutinising evidence before it's sent to court. The social work teams produce a lot of evidence to support the applications that the local authority makes, and part of legal's job is to review this before it's sent out to make sure that the local authority can evidence it's met the legal tests, to make sure that we ensure to make sure that we obtain the orders that are required to protect the child. Legal obviously always keeps social work teams up to date if there's any sort of case law developments or any other legal developments that they need to be aware of that will affect their practice. And another important job that legal services do is that we're fortunate that we've developed really good working relationships with other agencies across the county, in particular health, police and CAFCAS, as I've set out on that slide, who are the independent body that represent children in family court proceedings. Legal hold quarterly meetings with the police and CAFCAS in particular to make sure that the protocols that we've agreed between us to ensure that we work together effectively are working and that everybody's complying with those. And it also gives an opportunity for any issues that have arisen to be addressed directly between us to make sure that court proceedings in particular run smoothly and we don't get distracted by arguments between ourselves as to how the agency should be working. Continued liaison with CAFCAS as well also assists them in terms of allocation of cases. They have struggled in terms of recruiting and with staff, so if we can keep them informed of what's going to come their way, that really assists them and again keeps that good working relationship going on with them. And then Jodie, we've got one more about what we do.
Thank you. Just leading on from what Sarah set out there and the regular liaison, this slide ultimately sets out the multidisciplinary approach that we absolutely need to take across Lincolnshire and what we implement with legal services. And you'll see there that we have regular meetings with the designated family judge that Janice is actively involved with, along with our acting principal lawyer. Within those meetings, we discuss new protocols coming in, new case law, ensuring that Lincolnshire are on top of the game in terms of what are the next steps, looking at the themes that are featured within the proceedings. And as we've set out, and I think it's apparent from the new working guidance from the President of the Family Division, Lincolnshire have absolutely been front-loading this since before the guidance came out, and that has made our job much easier at this stage because we can say, oh, we're already doing that, so we can just make that a bit tighter and we can tweak it to make it fit in with the President's guidance, but also continue to implement what we are already implementing across the county, and that's worked really beneficial. The designated family judge actively supports us in presenting new ideas to the court, looking at new templates. We have a very active case manager that works between ourselves in legal services and the children's social work teams to ensure that the template documents hit all of the points that need to be hit. With regards to what the court require from us as a county council when looking at safeguarding for children, certainly when applying for such orders that we do whereby we are ultimately the corporate parent for a number of children coming out of these proceedings. So it's absolutely essential that we get that information and evidence down there, and we work with how things move, how things progress, and we review things absolutely on a regular basis, and that assists with the number of meetings and papers that we pull together to ensure the regular compliance and active review, really. So in addition to the designated family judge, I also have regular monthly meetings with the local family justice board that have the local authority, local practice solicitors. It has members of the judiciary in attendance, the magistrates, other members of the local authority, and again we pull all of our heads together to ensure active review and active compliance with any themes. And we also again look at performance, as Janice has already set out today, and it's really important within our public law performance group meeting arising from that that we look at how Lincolnshire are performing as a county, but also how that kind of looks at with our neighbouring counties. And it's set out within the report with regards to the public law outline. It would be an absolute ideal if all proceedings could conclude within 26 weeks, as set out many years ago. Unfortunately, we are not at that stage at the moment. The current figures as of now is that the average length of proceedings is between 46 and 50 weeks, which is considerably higher than the guidance, but that is absolutely in line with the national average across the country. And again, there's been details within the report as to the impact of COVID specifically in relation to that. And we've had a lot of changes across this last 16 to 18 months with regards to making effective hearings, to ensure that they are fair hearings and to ensure that we have good positive outcomes for the children. Sometimes that has led to delay, especially when we were trying to figure out what cloud video platform was and how to conduct a Skype hearing. But again, Lincolnshire's been instrumental in assisting the court by offering hearing hubs across the county, which has made it so much easier for parents across the county to participate in hearings with the benefit of their legal representative with them in a room, socially distant, all of the facilities available to them to participate with that. And that has worked extremely well to allow complicated and lengthy hearings, even as soon as probably June to July of last year, to work effectively so that final orders and final care plans could be considered for children across the county. So whilst our case numbers are high at the moment, we are working through the review, we are working through to cases concluding and ensuring effective hearings and continuing with that process. So next and final slide, please.
This last slide just sets out a couple of the issues that our team is looking at the moment and towards in the future. The biggest change for our team at the moment is we're going online. Prior to now, the court had kept paper files for all of the children and all of the cases. They are now transitioning to the FPL, which stands for Family Public Law Online System. In Lincolnshire, we've made an agreement with the court that all applications will now be issued on that system unless it's an urgent thing that needs to be dealt with on the day. That's certainly been a learning curve for both us and the court staff, but the purpose is to make the whole system more efficient, which should help keep things moving smoothly. Another big issue, which Jodie's already alluded to, is getting back into the court building and what we're going to do about remote hearings and other hearings moving forward. Fortunately, as Jodie's already mentioned, we adapted quite quickly to doing everything online, and the court's now looking at how that's going to change following restrictions being removed and whether or not we're going to go fully back to normal with every hearing taking place in the court building. Consultations are ongoing about that, but at the moment it's looking like we're going to keep some elements of remote working because it's been found to be much more efficient for certain types of hearings for everybody to be dialing in on the video platform rather than attending the court building, which again should help assist with things running more smoothly. The last big focus for legal services, as mentioned on the slide, is reducing the number of hearings so that we can get closer to that 26 weeks time scale. The Midlands area has just been allocated a new family liaison judge, who is a High Court judge allocated specifically to deal with cases in our area, and she's called Mrs Justice Leven, and she's issued some clear guidance recently that she is going to focus very strongly on reducing delay and increasing efficiency in our local family courts. So hopefully this should filter down to through to our local court, and we can start getting back to the 26 weeks that we are all aiming for. Which is obviously going to be of much greater benefit for children in getting them permanency earlier. So I don't think I've got anything else to raise unless anybody's got any questions.
Thank you both very much. Chiara, have you got any questions?
Thank you. We've got Councillor Matthews.
Sorry. Fascinating. Thank you very much. I've got two questions, if that's all right. Do we deal with young people who might be sectioned, is one question. And how do that? And secondly, it's another question from another hat I'm wearing. Do we use Mile Cross as a court building? Because the coroner's service has an issue with court access, and it's a Lincolnshire County Council demand is quite high, and they're using Miles Cross. I just wonder which facility you use. That's all. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor. In terms of children who are sectioned, we do sometimes have children across our area who have mental health complications and difficulties. It could be that we assist in ensuring that they are placed in a secure accommodation facility, and that is something where legal will be involved with. We don't necessarily deal with mental health law within our legal services as a separate entity, but they do certainly feature within some of the cases that we hold across the department. And in terms of your second question, Councillor, the Mile Cross Centre isn't used currently as a court hub, and we've predominantly based that within the children's centres, where the families are known to attend for contact and family time with the children. So it's a venue that is known to them and is comfortable to them. I can't imagine that Mile Cross couldn't necessarily put some facilities in place, but that would obviously be a separate matter, and it wouldn't necessarily be dealt with within the family court.
Thank you. Thank you. So you don't use the family court on the whole, you use familial surroundings, but the court is a convention of people, not a building.
Yes, absolutely. And again, we're working towards these hybrid hearings that they like to call them. Similar to today's meeting, we have some people in attendance, some people sat the other side of a laptop at the dining room tables or offices, and then it may be that the judge is sat within the courtroom or within court chambers. So it's ultimately bringing everyone together to have a remote hearing, but some people are in attendance in different ways.
Councillor Whittington, please.
Yeah, thanks very much, Nina. Thanks, Sarah. Thanks, Jodie. I can still remember the when we adopted our son. It's going back crikey now, 18 years ago. And actually, we said, "Oh, we're going to court," and of course, he had this vision that he was going to be set in a room similar to this, with judges with wigs on and all kinds of stuff. The reality is, it was down at the court in Lincoln. It was in a small side room. It was just like a business meeting. The judge was just there in a normal business suit. No sort of gowns or wigs, anything like that. Very, very informal process. Because I think the idea is because the children are in attendance. And it actually turned out to be a family day out in Lincoln, as it were. We got to go to the court as well. So I think with children, I'm kind of picking up from the report that actually sort of trying to make them almost hybrid now, and a bit online and a bit sort of mixed. It kind of takes away perhaps some of the worry and concern of children and young people, especially if it's a slightly more relaxed environment. Because I, obviously from personal experience, it is quite a traumatic experience when you're sort of in that legal sort of, the proceedings have started, but you're kind of working up to that day. But my question's around, because I know you've mentioned the fact that obviously during COVID there was a sort of course just shut down for a while, and there was a backlog of cases built up. But obviously you're using a variety of ways to try and reduce this. Just some indication really around, you said obviously now that we can focus is on getting the waiting times down to 26 weeks. Just when you roughly think you'd kind of almost be back to normal, as it were, would be interesting. But I know it might be difficult. Thank you.
I think I would probably echo with what Janice set out earlier, in that who knows what is going to happen next week, September. It is everyone's goal within the legal system, certainly dealing with children, that we have conclusions for children as swiftly as possible. And as Sarah set out, we have a new area judge, Mrs. Justice Levin, who is very, very keen to bring that down. We are working towards less hearings so that we can be very focused on the issues, so that things don't run into 2, 3, 4 week hearings. We can have very discrete issues to deal with the key issues with the case, so that we can push those towards conclusion. I would love to say, well, I don't want to commit to anything because anything could happen within the justice system, if I'm honest, in terms of where we are. And one of the other complications we're facing at the moment is judicial availability, because our designated family judge is only one person. She can only do so much. She's recently been supported by another circuit judge who has been promoted. Fantastic for him, but in Nottingham. So that means that we're losing him within Lincolnshire. So again, it's that regular consultation with the court to ensure that we're not pushing them over the edge in terms of capacity, but at the same time, we are meeting these children's needs across Lincolnshire.
Right, thank you. Cleo, have you any questions? She's not with us, fine.
We've got Councillor Kelly would like to speak.
Thank you. This is probably a really stupid question. Can members of the public sit in on a family court hearing?
The answer to that is no.
Right, that's what I expected, yeah. Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you both very much. The panel is invited to note the report and comment on the presentations. I move that we note the report and comments from the discussions and the presentation received. Can I ask you to raise your hand if you're in agreement? That's great, thank you. So we now move on to item 12, Voices for Choices, V4C, update report. This item on pages 139 to 146 of the agenda pack gives a summary and overview of activities of V4C, future planning and progress of existing projects, including sound links. The report will be presented by Ben Lilly, Team Manager, Quality and Standards, and once again we'll take the questions at the end.
Thank you, Chair, and good morning, everybody. This report, just to start with, goes back a bit further than the usual period of time. It goes back to February 2021, and that's really just to capture everything that has happened since the previous V4C update report. So V4C, Voices for Choices, is our name for our Children in Care Council, and what this is about meetings with young people who are in care to get their feedback to help us develop and improve services. So from page 139, what we've got here is a summary of V4C delivery and activities from February, broken down across the 4 localities. And I think it's important to just to note that during this reporting period, we've obviously had the ongoing restrictions and unavailability of physical activities and meetings. So for a significant part of this period, we've continued delivering activities remotely via Zoom. However, towards the end of May and into June, we've been able to start to reintroduce some physical meetings and activities. So, summary of activities by area. We in Lincoln and West Lindsey, you can see there on page 140 some of the activities that have been taken place. In North Home Children's Home, we've had some attendances at the Youth Centre. We've had a virtual quiz, some holiday activities, and an activity at Wild Pines Activity Centre over in Market Rasen. We've also, on an ongoing basis, we have the Senior Youth and Community Development Worker who is visiting North Home Children's Home on a monthly basis to engage with and undertake work with the children and young people there as well. Boston and South Holland, on page 141, since COVID, they've had a strong virtual group which they've managed to maintain, and to the point where the group wanted quite more regular meetings, and you can see there the attendances which have been pretty consistent, and the types of topics and things they've been talking about are listed there. A mixture of fun activities such as bingo, with work and getting their feedback around issues such as language that's used within children's services, the coming into care kit that groups are reviewing, and the Big Ask consultation, which was a national consultation about for all children and young people. We have in North and South Kesteven similar kinds of virtual activities with some inconsistencies in terms of attendances, and we've been to visit the Eastgate Children's Home in Sleaford to hopefully encourage some of the children and young people there to attend further in the future. And in East Lindsey, again, we've had some difficulties in engaging young people and children via virtually, but it's pleasing to note that we had a face-to-face meeting at Skegness in June, and we had 5 attendees. So we're hoping to build back and get back to where we were with some of the face-to-face sessions going forward. Alongside the V4C meetings, we've also over the past year had the V4C Virtual Sound Links programme, and this was very much about providing further activities to keep children and young people engaged in V4C and to give them some good new activities to do. So we had a Sound Links project that's ongoing still with 3 different groups around rhymes and beats. We've had learning to play the ukulele and electronic music production and recording now as well. And the report gives some indication of the dates and attendees really as well down there. And they've requested that to continue. So we think in some shape or form, such virtual activities will remain for V4C members. We've also introduced a virtual V4C monthly quiz, which is for any members of V4C across the county to come together to attend that activity. And again, it's helping us just to keep engaged with the children and young people. In terms of planning, we're in a position now where we have and are moving back to face-to-face delivery, and so far that's been really within the youth centres and a few ad hoc locations such as the Wild Pines Centre. We are looking to move back to more varied face-to-face sessions in the future, according to whatever the children and young people would like to go and where they would like to meet. The option of virtual V4C meetings, in addition to the physical meetings, we think we will continue running both options, because there's some children and young people who like the physical meetings and some children and young people who prefer the virtual meetings. So the obvious solution is to offer both going forward. Also, just to let everybody know, we've had the big conversation events previously. Obviously, we haven't held those since COVID because they are a larger physical meeting which brings together all the V4C groups. We have made a provisional booking for October to reintroduce the next big conversation meeting. It has been changed from the report that says Ancaster Leisure Centre. It's now going to be at the Lincoln Showroom. And there are some limits on numbers, but we're hoping to get invitations out to members and officers shortly, if not already, they haven't already been sent. So to conclude, the delivery of V4C meetings and sessions has been taking place via Zoom since the start of the COVID pandemic, and I think the report today evidences some good examples of virtual delivery, although there's remains inconsistencies in terms of engagement in some areas. And we've had some initial successful moves to reintroduce face-to-face meetings within this reporting period as well, and that's a really good base, hopefully now from which we can progress. And as I've said previously, the Sound Links music programme, again, positive feedback, and we're hoping to continue with that. And that concludes my report, and hopefully there's some questions and discussion to have.
Thank you. Yeah, do we have any questions, please? Then I've got one question for you. You mentioned going back to physical and virtual. Are you also doing the hybrid version as well? So you physical.
That's that's the plan. So the idea is to have physical meetings and specific virtual meetings, but also to have a hybrid of both as well. So yeah.
Okay, thank you. So if we have no more questions, then the actions are the corporate parenting panel is invited to provide comment and steer regarding V4C activities and meetings undertaken within the reporting period, future planning and delivery of V4C meetings and activities. I propose that the panel receives the report and has reviewed the delivery of V4C activities, meetings and projects undertaken within the reporting period and beyond. Can I ask you to raise your hand if you're in agreement? Thank you very much. Thank you, Ben.
Thank you. Apologies I'm not there today. I have a self-isolating daughter with a persistent cough, but apparently testing negative for COVID, but I didn't want to leave her on her own today.
Hybrid works well. Thank you.
Thank you.
So we now move on to item 13, Independent Reviewing Officer Yearly Report. This item on pages 147 to 170 of the agenda pack and provides the panel with the opportunity to consider an update on work undertaken between April 2020 and March 2021, as well as future priorities. A further presentation will be received in relation to this and will also cover the next item on the agenda, Independent Reviewing Officer Yearly Report. This item is presented by Carolyn Knight, Quality and Standards Manager. And again, questions at the end. Thank you.
Good morning. Can you hear me? Yes. Just went into standby mode, which slightly threw me. So, good morning. Thank you. So, I'm the manager for the Quality and Standards Service. So, within my service area, I have the independent chairs, the independent reviewing officers and Regulation 44 officers. So, I do have a brief presentation rather than talking you through the chairs. It is brief, hopefully, and then I'll take questions at the end. Can I have the next slide? Thank you. So, again, like most of children's services, lots of legal law underpinning everything we do and statutory guidance, and I'm not going to go through all of those, but obviously, as you can see, there's quite a lot of guidance and legal requirements. So the roles of the independent chair, the IRO, and the Reg 44 officer, which I will go on to explain what they all are statutory requirements. We have to have them by law. So can I have the next slide, please, Cara? Thank you. So I'll start with the independent reviewing officer. As I said, statutory requirement. In Lincolnshire, we've merged the roles several years ago. So we have an independent chair role, which is responsible for chairing child protection meetings, basically, and an independent reviewing officer. But for the purpose of this, I've split out the functions, but all the staff in the team do both roles. So they will be managing a caseload of child protection cases and child in care cases. So it's very difficult for these purposes to split out numbers and facts and figures for you, but I have split out the functions in this presentation. So the role of the IRO basically is to oversee the care plan for any child who is in care of the local authority, and the IRO has to ensure that the assessments that underpin the plan are really robust, meet that child's needs, and that the plan is going to meet the child's needs and that it progresses really as well. So it's really a quality assurance sort of role, really. So it's checking out assessments, asking questions like, does this child need to be in care? Is this child in the right placement? Looking at education issues, family time. So are they seeing, parents, other relatives, siblings, all those sort of things. So there's a lot of duties that it has to cover off in their role. They have to, obviously, part of the role, ensure that the voice of the child is heard. That is absolutely key because, you know, we cannot do two children. We have to listen to what the child says, what they would like. Obviously, we can't always do what the child would like. As you know, they might say, I'd like a quick trip to Disneyland, not always within our gift. But if we cannot meet their wishes, then obviously we need to explain why and the rationale around that, just so the child understands what's happening with them really and where they're going and where they're living. Talked about assessments. So one of our roles, similar to corporate parenting panel really, is to monitor performance of the local authority. So we do report back to Janice and colleagues. We do after each review. So I'm not explaining it very well, am I? Basically, so when a child comes into care, there are time periods by which a child has to have a review. So within a month, within 3 months, and then every 6 months, whilst that child is in care, they have to have what's called a child in care review. And that review involves getting the child, the parents, the carers, key professionals that are working with that child, so usually school, health as a minimum, sometimes leaving care, depends on the age of the child and who's involved with them. At that meeting, we talk about the care plan, we update from how they've been from the last time, or all their needs been met, or are there any services that need to be put in. Is the care plan meeting their needs, basically, is the aim of it all. And we feed back after the meeting to social care team, and one of our roles is, if needed, to challenge the local authority, to challenge other professionals, other agencies. We act as an advocate for the child, and we are allocated for any child who's in care from the age of 0 right up to 18. We don't do post-18s. It is an issue we have looked at, but at the minute the legal requirement is only 0 to 18. And the IRO also chairs short break reviews, which are for children with disability who predominantly will live at home, but will come into our facilities for respite care. And if it adds up to more than 17 days a year and the team feel the child's got additional needs, then the plan for that is reviewed by an independent reviewing officer as well. So that's the IRO role. Can we move on to the next slide, please, Kara? Thank you. I've just put this in so you understood the other role really as well. And a lot of our young people who are in care do come through the child protection route. So one of the good things about the dual role is quite often the child protection chair will remain that young person's IRO once they come into the care of Lincolnshire County Council. So there is some continuity and some knowledge that follows the child from the start of their journey. So I won't go through all that in detail about conference chairs, but basically conferences are held when there is a concern that the child is likely to suffer significant harm, and there's a whole series of investigations that go on, and the outcome is child protection meetings. Again, similar timescales, although the first one would be within 15 days, then within 3 months, then within 6 months, as long as that child remains on a child protection plan. Next slide, Kira. I think that the next slide's very similar. Yeah, that's fine, thanks. So yeah, we skipped over a child, but that was fine. And then the other part of the role that's managed within the team. And I ought to just say, actually, the team sits outside of Janice's line management, so we have to sit separate, independently, or as independently as we can. We're still all employed by Lincolnshire County Council, but the IROs, Reg 44s, inspectors, need to be not within the operational line management responsibilities. So we sit under Joe Kavanagh's area of responsibility, so we're not in with safeguarding and the regulated service line management to give us that added independence. So the role of the Regulation 44 inspector is to basically inspect our local authority children's homes. This has to be done every month and a report produced in a timely way, and the report goes to Ofsted. And it's used by Ofsted to sort of monitor how the home is and any issues with the home between their inspections. There are a number of standards that we have to meet. So the Regulation 44 officer will physically go and visit the home and has to work through all these standards. So they see all the records, if there's been any restraints that month, any incidents. They check the care plans are all there and on file. There's quite a lot of standards, as you'll see there. They have to report under each of those standards. So issues about health, how the home's been managed, any issues that Ofsted have raised previously, need to check that those are all being followed through. So we do that for all 7 of our local authority homes. And then, as Andy mentioned earlier, we have Ralston and Denton, and we do those slightly less often. We do those quarterly. We do it to the same standard, and that's because we thought that was good practice, really. And those reports don't go to Ofsted. I think they just go to Janice. But it does help monitor progress of the homes, really. And we feed into regular meetings with the home managers, because we often identify good practice and things that work really well in some homes that we want to sort of roll out and make sure we share across other homes. So that's our critical friend role. So it's always a fine line between working with people, really, and offering that challenge. And so I think in the report you've got before you today, it will go through all the homes and all the issues that have been raised with them over the last year, but I've not put those into the presentation. So I think really, can I have the next slide? Sorry, Kira. So the main focus, and I guess that's why we call the quality and standards service, really, is the focus for all the roles we have is around quality assurance. So the role of the IRO and the role of the Reg 44 officer are very key in monitoring progress of children, our children in care, acting as their advocate. We undertake quite a lot of audits, and the quality assurance service also sits within this team. So there's quite a lot of audits go on in respect of the staff in the team, but also we're involved in audits for wider children's services and supporting those. Big role around challenge and escalation. If we are concerned that a child's not in the right placement, or their care plan's drifting, or if the child says, well, I'd like to see a bit more of my mum than I do now, we will flag those up. We try and do it proactively, so that we're picking up issues and bringing them to the attention of the social work teams and the people that need to know before it gets to a difficult point. So we are quite proactive, and we've recently gone back to seeing more children physically. That slowed down through COVID. We did still keep in contact with children, but it was virtually rather than physically. So the key point about these roles is we do not case manage. So we do not, although the IROs have a caseload, they are not responsible for the care planning that goes on. That's done by the social workers. Next slide, please, Chiara. So these priorities are mainly in respect of the IRO service, because there aren't specific priorities for the Reg 44 officers. They just keep going every month to visit the homes and to do the assessments. So one of the main priorities for conferencing and children in care is around getting back to some physical meetings. Obviously, like everybody last year, we were forced at very short notice to suddenly do meetings virtually, and to start with, we only had phones and couldn't even connect with that many people. So the plan is to start having those physically. Staff are now going out and seeing young people to make sure we've got their views and wishes around their care plans. We would like to move to hybrid meetings. We have had some for child protection along the way, so if it was, say, a domestic abuse case where we were worried the perpetrator might still be in the home with the victim, we've tried to accommodate those in offices, but we haven't as yet got the facilities that we've got within this chamber. They are going to be rolled out as part of safer work, smarter working, but at the minute we're reduced to a laptop that we have to sort of turn around. So it's not ideal, but we're getting there. So our ultimate aim is hybrid meetings. We're hoping to go back to physical meetings from the beginning of September. We're at the Safeguarding Board tomorrow to discuss that in more detail. Although with numbers going up, we suspect it might be put off a little longer. We've done a large piece of work which is about to be presented to the executive DLT in the near future about feedback, because we used to do an annual Tell Us survey of children in care, but over recent years numbers of people participating in that were dwindling. So Ben, who presented the previous paper, has pulled together all the feedback and all the opportunities that young people and families get when they're involved with children's services to feed in their wishes and feelings and how they found everything. And we collect masses, absolutely masses. No wonder they didn't want to do another survey. So we've been working with digital engagement, and they're coming online now is a digital facility that hopefully people will be able to use, so we'll be able to get feedback physically and collate it a little better, because at the minute different teams might send out a survey or ask people to fill in things, or when they have a review, young people in care get asked to fill in a form about their views. There's quite a lot of feedback, and we just need to be smarter about how we use that really, and how that can inform our service delivery, not just for our service, but across children's services. We've rolled out, we trialled it pre-April, but it's now been implemented in practice, a pre-birth protocol, which is on the child protection side really, which reduces the duplication of families. So if there's concerns about a woman who's pregnant, she may have had several babies removed through care proceedings and placed for adoption historically. What used to happen was they would come in and also have a child protection plan as well as go into pre-proceedings, and it just felt a bit duplication and not very family friendly. So we've reduced the need to have a conference while still having safeguards around that, and that's one of our priorities, to continue monitoring the rollout from now. Have the next slide. I think this is the last slide, you'll be pleased to know. We're still working with LSCP. We're doing quite a lot of work with the Safeguarding Board really around rolling out child protection and trying to improve performance across the board, because it's not just the local authority. There's a lot of other partner agencies involved with child protection. We noticed probably the year before last that we had low numbers of children on child protection plans for sexual harm. So we've done quite a lot of work trying to unpick why that is. Is it being coded wrongly? Are we not picking it up very well? And so we've got a plan of work around that. We're also focusing on absent parents, because all too often, and it usually is fathers, that we always sort of try and manage to get mums to conferences, but sometimes we're not quite as proactive on fathers, so we're pushing that. And we wanted to review our internal 12-month process for when children have been on a plan for 12 months. To make sure that was robust and was at the right time, and we've just concluded that really and agreed it's going to move to 18 months. So the priorities are both for child protection and IRO, and that's why I mentioned child protection in the presentation as well. So apologies that it's covers both, but it's quite difficult to separate them out, otherwise it might look like we've not got many priorities. Okay.
Okay, thank you very much. Again, have we any questions?
Councillor Matthews, followed by Councillor
Thank you very much. I've got 3 questions, and is that okay? One, what's the significance of 17 days of respite care as opposed to 18 or 16? That's one question. On page 162, it says clearer guidance and processes required for receiving independent legal advice. And I wonder why that has come up and if we're actioning that, because we've got the legal team here. And I don't know if this is related, but it says 5 young people have been sectioned to secure accommodation under Section 25 of the Children's Act. And I don't know if that requires, I think we mentioned that it probably did require some legal involvement. So I'm asking the question of, are our legal services team working hand in glove with these IROs, or is there some slight tension there? That was the question. Sir, sorry.
Sorry, can you just repeat your first? Oh, I'll answer the last question while it's still fresh in my mind, and then I'll ask you to go back.
The first question was just an intriguing one. It said that the IRA has to make sure they haven't had more than 17 days of respite care, and I wondered why it was 17, which is not 2 weeks and it's not 3 weeks. It's sort of.
I'd like to say I knew the answer, but I'm sorry. That's just what's in the statutory guidance. Sorry? I don't know. Paul wrote that, so I'd have to go back and check. There's certainly a certain amount of days that if you go over it by an hour, you have to have.
I know. Sorry.
It's just like the government. You know, it's like timescales. The IRO's review is 28 days and then 83 and 156. They're just, you know, to the layperson, they do look a bit random. And yes. No, there's. Sorry, and what was your second? Right, yes, I can tell you. So, IROs, because they are independent, are under the handbook, the 2010 IRO handbook, are entitled to independent legal advice. And we do have an agreement with some chambers in Nottinghamshire that was made perhaps back in 2016. And to be fair, we have never ever used it. And then recently we had a case where we wanted some independent legal advice, and it wasn't very clear because we hadn't revisited that contract really. We've never used it. So we did have some conversations. We're not allowed to use our legal because they represent the social work team and they're therefore not independent. So it'd be a conflict of interest for them. So yes, it was a bit of a rush around trying to locate who we could use. And to be fair, our legal did put us in touch with another legal firm and we went through them. But we just need to revisit that contract because we've not used it. We just need to check if that agreement is still in place. So that's in hand. We're reviewing that. But I'm pleased to say it's rare we ever need. Well, that's the only time. Hence, there was a bit of a panic.
As it says, 5 young people have been subject to secure accommodation under Section 25 of the Children's Act. And I wonder if that is the case, if there's legal involvement there, and if so, is that this independent stuff or is that our own team?
Okay, right. There are a number of routes by which young people can find themselves in secure accommodation. There's obviously a criminal route, so young people that commit offences that are under 18. Some of the older ones will go to young offenders institution, but if they're younger or particularly vulnerable, they would go to a secure unit. The other route is what we call welfare secure orders, so it's on grounds if they persistently abscond, if they're a risk of harm to themselves or to others. So we have had a few. So IROs are responsible for both. So basically, if a child is an under 18 is remanded by the criminal court to secure unit, then they then become a child in care, and the IRO is then allocated because they have to be have the reviews as any child in care would. And then the other route is the welfare secure route. If they're putting themselves at risk, that would involve our legal. It involves Janice having to make a decision about whether she thinks the criteria are met. We then talk to legal and we have to go to court and get a secure welfare order. And then I think, but Jodie will probably correct me, we also have to apply for interim care order if they're not already on a care order. And then again, both routes, whether it's a criminal remand or a welfare, same child in care arrangements apply. So it's reviews at the same time scale for any child in care.
That's not we're on top of that though. That's not flagging up issues.
No, there's
you referred to that
no
earlier.
concerns. We've got an excellent secure unit at Sleaford, which is also inspected by one of the Reg 44 officers as well, so keeps us busy.
Thank you. Councillor Hayes.
Thank you, Chairman. On page 151 of your report, Carolyn, it mentions the lockdown group at the very top of the page, and it says 83% of those that attended contributed and felt listened to. And then you go down to the negative feedback, and it says that nearly half of those felt that there was no contact with their IRO and reviews and didn't really know what to do. I'm not too bothered about that, as long as the children think that the system as a whole listens to them and, where within reason, get what they want, for want of a better way of putting it. And that's the only comments I would have to make. Thank you, Chairman.
This was a survey that was done when we first went into lockdown. We had the participation team who were obviously not able to do much participation at that point. So we asked them to do some work around contacting young people. I think this is one of the issues that often comes up on the Tell Us survey as well, about reviews and feeling listened to. If you look on the performance data that Janice talked to earlier, I think over 97% of young people attended or expressed their wishes and views to their review. But it's not always they attend in person. They might fill in a form for us, they might have an advocate, they might ask somebody else, like the foster carer, to speak for them. It's always very difficult when we do surveys because it's just that point in time, isn't it? I do think we have an issue about not knowing who their IRO is and not having contact from their IROs, and that's been something we are trying to drive forward now. And I think for some young people, they just have so many people in their lives as well. And if you ask somebody who's your IRO, they'd be like, but if you said, do you see much of Andy? They'd be like, oh yeah. So yes, we are aware of it, and we are trying to make sure that we're reviewing the child in care kit, as Ben alluded to in his report. When each child comes into care, they are given a physical kit which explains what being in care means, what your entitlements are in a child-friendly way. And the IRO does have a duty to make sure the child knows what their care plan is and seeks their views on it. So we do try and we do monitor it, but yeah, sadly, not many felt their review was meaningful. But it's difficult, isn't it? And it's been more difficult, I think, in some ways in COVID, because before we were having some real child-friendly reviews, and we had changed them from being a formal sit-down meeting. So we'd got posters on the wall, we did cake baking and made it a more interactive experience for them. Obviously, when we've been doing it virtually, not so easy to whip up a cake at the same time. And although some older young people attended for the first time because they could join remotely and choose when they came into the meeting and when they went, it's variable, isn't it, really? So what we say about reviews is it's child specific. The IRO should meet with the child, agree with the child what form they want their review to take. It doesn't have to be one meeting, it can be a series of meetings. So if the child just wants to meet with the IRO on their own, that's fine. Then the IRO can meet with other key people. So it can be a real combination and series of meetings. So we do try, with numbers of children in care going up, caseloads are going up as well. And the other challenge we had, which has been easier with COVID, is the geography, that some children, might not be placed around the corner from where the IRO is based, and getting across county for a visit after school time was a bit tricky, but we keep chipping away.
Yeah, do we have No question. And is Cleo gone? Okay, that's great. I will take these two separately in the next bit. So the action for item 13 is that members of the corporate parenting panel are requested to note the yearly report on the independent chair's service and make comments on the presentation to be provided at the meeting. I propose that the panel receives the report and has reviewed the delivery of the independent chair's service and that our comments be noted. Can I ask you to raise your hand if you're in agreement, please? Thank you. And then actions for 14, members of the corporate parenting panel are requested to note the yearly report on the Regulation 44 independent visiting service and make comments on the presentation provided at the meeting. I propose that the panel receives the report and has reviewed the delivery of the Regulation 44 independent visiting service and comments to be noted. And once again, can I ask you to raise your hand if you're in agreement, please? Thank you very much. So we move on to item 15, the final item, panel working programme. This item on page 195 to 198 of the agenda pack enables the panel to comment on the content of its work programme. The report will be presented by Chiara, and I'm sorry, I'm not even going to try the next bits. I apologise. Scrutiny officer, we will take question at the end of the report. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. My name is Chiara Cazioanu. I am a scrutiny officer responsible for this panel, and I'm pleased to be around you today. So the intention is that we bring the work programme in each and every meeting to be reviewed as to ensure that the contents are still relevant and that they do add value to the work of the Council and partners. The Corporate Parenting Panel, therefore, is asked to agree the work programme today and to identify any new items for future meetings. I just wanted to raise that since the issuing of this work programme with the agenda, we have not had any changes, amendments, additions or omissions of items. So that's it from me. Handing back to you.
Thank you very much. So I'll move around the room if I might. Councillor Higgs, do you have any questions on this?
No comments to make, thank you, Chairman.
Councillor Matthews? No? And Elizabeth Bunny, hello there. You're hidden at the back. Any question? Okay, that is great. The only thing I wanted to bring up was, as I said before, I have an interest in marketing. If my fellow councillors and Elizabeth have an interest in bringing a report here about how the marketing of adoption services have done, fine. But if not, then I'm happy just to pursue that by myself. So it's really a question of as whether the three of you would be interested in a report back on how we do that. Oh, sorry. I am so sorry. Thank you. And even more importantly, was there anything else you wanted to say on the comment? And I apologise. You'll tell me off later. So, Councillor Matthews, Councillor Higgs, yeah, we'd like to see that on. And Elizabeth, is that of interest to you, how we market the...
I'm not a councillor, I'm an observer.
Yes, I know, but I'm interested in your views, whether you'd like to hear about how we market it.
I think I'd be interested. I'm not interested in taking part with it, but I'm interested in it being a...
Super. Great, thank you. Okay, if we could sort of work that in somewhere. That would be great, thank you. Let me find it. So the actions of the corporate parenting panel is asked to agree the work programme and identify any... Oh, sorry, my apologies, Janice.
Wanted to interject and perhaps make a couple of suggestions. Absolutely,
Forgot. Done so well. Yeah, so I just wondered whether it might be worth, I was just thinking about maybe kind of reorganising the agenda slightly, because I've noticed that in November we have got some papers that actually we could bring to the September meeting, and if it's with your agreement, we could do fostering and adoption, marketing and recruitment for the panel. Yeah, I'll leave that one with Deborah. So if we add that to the September, I was thinking that We've got the Fostering Quarterly Performance Report, Q1, on November, and actually that would be better placed being received in the September. It will keep it more in timescales for you. I think by the time you get to November, we should be reporting Q2. So we'll move the Fostering Quarterly Performance Report to September Q1, and then we'll put Q2 on in the November slot, if that's okay. And then similarly, I would suggest that we could, if it was agreeable, we could move the private fostering annual report and statement of purpose. If I was thinking at the time, but we've just added a paper, so we've probably got a balanced agenda now, so probably leave that one where it is. Is that okay? So we'll have fostering annual report, statement of purpose, children and care performance measures Q1, adoption annual report and statement of purpose, fostering adoption, marketing and recruitment, and then Q1 fostering quarterly reports. Yeah. So that leaves you with 5 in September and 7 in November. So we could bring the private fostering just to balance out your agendas. Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Chair.
God. Sorry.
Good afternoon, Stephen. I don't know how this works, but obviously we've alluded to the fact that when we're doing the councillor development meeting next week, some of the corporate parenting issues are going to be discussed, aren't they? That's what we've talked about earlier. So I don't know after discussion, where does that information go, and would that be appropriate to? I'm just wondering what happens to that, and whether that would be appropriate that we find out what may be lacking in 70 councillors who are not on the corporate parenting board, and we review it. But I don't know whether that's the legitimate pathway or where that goes. Does anybody else? Do you not sure what I mean? Oh, never mind. I'll have a word with Democratic Services.
Thank you, Chairman. It will be brought up at council development, and it will be taken forward, and it be mentioned in next Monday's meeting. Okay.
Good show, somebody knows. Thank you. So I think that covers everything, doesn't it? So I'll go back to actions. The corporate parenting panel is asked to agree the work programme and identify any items for future meetings. I need to slightly reword the proposal. I move that we note the report and approve the amended work programme as just been detailed. Can I ask you to raise your hands if you're in agreement? Thank you all very much. That is agreed. So now we're at the end of the meeting, and thank you everybody for your attendance.